We manage millions of pounds a year of Google Ads spend for SaaS brands. So in this video, I'm going to run through some advanced Google Ads strategies and tactics that should hopefully save you a lot of time and a lot of money. So let's jump straight into it. The thing I want to touch on initially is something that we've seen massively, especially in the B2B SaaS space, is there's large amounts of funding going around. And with large amounts of funding comes naturally large amount of direct response marketing activity. And within that direct response, I kind of categorize Google Ads being one of those primary drivers of where a lot of the marketing dollars and pounds are spent. Now, typically in most B2B or general Google Ads industries, you can kind of gauge how effective a keyword is going to be and how profitable it's going to be and how high its intent is going to be by how much other people are bidding on those queries as sort of like an early indicator, because that company or the agency running that company account have probably gone through all the testing and kind of found that these are the queries where the most return is coming, so it acts as a really good benchmark when doing your keyword research. Now, the problem is with overinflated funding rounds and too much money being thrown at certain companies is that a lot of these companies keep expecting the same returns as they did earlier on when they were doing marketing, which ultimately, unfortunately, means they put more money than is necessary into Google Ads, and they kind of hit that diminishing returns and really over-index on the platform itself, which means someone could be spending 100 grand a month and getting a really good return, but when they start scaling to £1 million a month, they've already kind of captured all the demand in the market, and all they're doing now is inflating CPCs, going broader targeting, and they're really kind of wasting a lot of money. And you see that a lot in much larger accounts who have tried to grow and have pressure to get that direct response attribution to be able to keep growing companies fast. So what I'm saying is, if you're competing in the SaaS space, you need to know who you're competing against and the levels of funding they've acquired over the years, because chances are if they've kind of raised loads of funding, they're literally just bidding on keywords to remain there at the forefront of the industry. One of the things I like to do when going into especially a smaller SaaS startup Google Ads account is look at the auction insights. If you go into Google Ads and click on auction insights, you'll be able to go down here and see your impression share and the overlap rate with a lot of these companies down here. Pull those 4 or 5 companies and plug them into the likes of Crunchbase. This Crunchbase data will show you how much funding they've raised. And if you have, say for example, your help desk software and you're up against like Freshdesk, as someone who's raised a lot of money potentially, or Zendesk, again, very big competitor of a help desk startup, then they've raised so much money that they may really be overinflating how much money they're spending on those certain keywords like help desk software, help desk systems, for example. And I actually haven't looked into this, so I'm kind of just guessing on those those companies are spending too much. It's not a dig at them at all. It's just the first software that came into my head as I was doing this. But you go plug that in, they would have spent a lot of money. So probably from the top of the bat, they're going to be really potentially over-indexing on some of these queries. And it's going to be hard for a company that has £5,000 or £10,000 per month to compete in that space. So that's kind of when you need to become a bit more resourceful and try and really work out your positioning in the industry. Next, we go down to the big thing that can help with that, which is going to be whether it's HubSpot, Salesforce, NetSuite, whatever it may be. There's going to be different approaches, but Google's, I'll get onto in a minute, consolidating ways in which you can re-upload this data. But for example, if you go into HubSpot, you can literally connect your Google Ads account with your HubSpot. And what that would do would be pulling through all the UTMs, so like keyword, campaign group, all the sort of like enrichment information, which is really handy. It'll also import something called a GSLID, which is a unique click identifier, which ultimately is going to be the hidden value behind each individual who clicks on a Google ad, which becomes important in a minute. Now, this is super important because when you go and run these HubSpot reports from paid search direct response leads, you want to make sure that you know what the queries are coming through. So again, going back to the help desk software idea, that if you are serving a certain industry like education, hospitality, insert industry there, plus help desk software, you may start finding trends early on when you have a relatively broader account to say, okay, I've actually identified there's a big market here for our solution with this industry. It could be other qualifiers, things like on-premise, secure, whatever it may be. But because you're competing against these massive generic help desk providers, you need to make sure that if you have a small budget, you got super tight on your positioning and why that someone would use you guys versus a massively large credible competitor in the space versus you guys maybe a new up and comer? What is your positioning? And then how can that translate into a Google Ads strategy, which is either led from you guys, which you can then test by looking at your HubSpot data to see if it's working at that granular level, or you can actually go and do it from a Google Ads perspective first, see where you're getting the most traction, and then actually really amplify and double down and allocate budget to try and increase that impression share across those very fundamental bits of the sort of queries and the keyword groups that you're finding quite profitable. Next will be the conversion tracking within the account. From a Google Ads perspective, in January of 2024, which is currently this year, we found that, we haven't found, there was an update in the data manager, which allows you to go in there and select where you want to re-upload your G-Slid and offline information from, so you can create these offline conversion trackings within the account. Previously, this was only available for Salesforce as an automatic upload, and you had to use things like data warehouses or manual uploads for the likes of HubSpot or other popular CRMs. So now you can re-upload it using the data manager, which really is Google's way of allowing you to connect this offline information to push it back into your Google Ads. So rather than having to look at doing your HubSpot manual analysis and then kind of making those manual changes, you can use this automatic data upload, and you can then start seeing that data within the account. Whether it's going to be things like initially qualified leads to start with, which is going to be great, versus just going off the ones and zeros, which may be useless in the account. Then looking at potentially things like pipeline, and then looking at things, the golden holy grail of, net new closed business within HubSpot, which re-uploads it and associates it to the G-Slid, which again could be, depending on your buyer journey down the line. So you might want to start with one KPI and then sort of like progress that as it moves further down. This will become important a bit later on when I talk about bidding as well. So from an objective perspective, one of the things when you set up your Google Ads campaign initially is you want to go on to create a leads campaign. This again will allow you to start using some of Google's smart bidding features in the future. And now I'm not talking about Performance Max because I'm not a fan, especially in high CPC industries anyway. So click on leads because this allows you to take better use of these functions later down the line. I used to be a big fan of creating a campaign without goal guidance to give me more flexibility, but as we're sort of noticing a few things, which I'll get onto, I definitely prefer this route now, so does the team. From a actual campaign, you want to create a search campaign. Again, Performance Max and demand gen campaigns are very much the ones which Google are trying to push at the moment. But sticking with search campaigns versus letting Google have that full automation from PMax and driving existing customers and kind of a bit of a black box to where your data's going. You physically have to reach out to Google for them to say, let me know or block my brand bidding, or you need to run like sort of scripts in the back end to be able to see the queries that are actually appearing. So yeah, I don't necessarily trust anything that has that much control and you have to physically and manually request access to some of that data. From a bidding perspective, we always start, especially with new accounts, with manual bidding. Now, what we do is we create the, whether it's maximize clicks or manual CPC, you can then set a maximum CPC limit, which we get from the keyword data. Now, the thing I like about this is it starts to let you really know the account and do these early checks to work out what your impression share is, and ultimately where you stand from a CPC perspective. Can I raise that a little bit and what's the impact? We found a lot of the times that even though Google says you're bidding below first page, we were still getting like a 60-70% impression share on sort of like the top four. So I don't necessarily trust the CPCs like to a point. Same with LinkedIn ads, we kind of under test the CPCs, and then if it's not getting the impressions it needs, we then increase that. And then as we start seeing that CRM data come through from HubSpot, which is profitable, we then increase the impression share, and we can actually start creating, absolute top or, near 80+% impression share to make sure we're getting a really good statistical analysis. Because if you bid 80% of the time at the top and you get a standard conversion rate, you can kind of trust that conversion rate across the board. But if you're getting like 50% impression share and you're getting XYZ conversion rate, it's going to fluctuate more because you're not bidding enough of the time to capture enough of the market in that SERP to be able to see what the actual demand is and what sort of like the estimate conversion rate should be. Once we start getting traction and start looking at conversions coming through and start uploading the offline data, whether it's qualified leads or whatever it may be off the back of it, we can then start to potentially change that to a target cost per acquisition. So we have a target CPA, which we've actually started testing manually. We know that, say, £500 per qualified lead is something that's actually going to be possible for us. So we could test it between 400 and 500 and go after that. It differs depending on how big your account is, the opportunity within the account, and sort of like the size of the industry before you can kind of switch this over. So what we typically do is get a manual cost per lead down to what we think we can get it. We then transition over to cost per acquisition. If it then sort of takes up, Google then starts looking at the profile of the people a bit more behind the clicks rather than just bidding manually across the board at a keyword level, taking the data behind the information which is actually converted previously and then trying to push those to absolute top if they think someone's more likely to buy. What you will then find is you can worry less about impression share at this point because Google's doing a bit more of the heavy lifting and deciding which ones they should and shouldn't appear in front of from a user perspective, depending on what they think their intent is. Sometimes it works amazingly well. Sometimes the results don't massively increase or even stay the same. They can decrease slightly. So then we'll switch that off, go back to manual, rebuild that back up again with the data, and then switch back again when we think we've got enough data in the account to sort of steer that direction from Google's and automated bidding. So you definitely need to make sure, one, you have the correct tracking set up. Two, start with manual. If you don't have the correct tracking set up and you don't have the qualified conversion tracking re-uploads and you don't have and you have automated bidding, then it's a really good way of letting Google have full reign and optimizing for users, which you don't want to have as leads anyway. So definitely be careful. And these are sort of some of the more advanced strategies which we recommend using. Now, from a keyword level, there's 3 different types of keyword in my book outside of just branded. We don't talk about branded keyword because you've a lot of ways already earned that traffic and you can bid on it if other people are bidding on your brand. But again, it's kind of like that sunk cost. So we have like alerts which are set up that if someone is bidding on one of our clients' brands, we then put on brand bidding, and it is pennies on the pound because obviously it's super relevant to you guys' brand because it's your company. So we have alerts for that, but if it's no one else is bidding on it, we typically don't bid on that in itself because you haven't got to protect that brand. But we have brand alternative, for example. So you'd have like Zoom alternatives, which is a really good qualifier. Someone knows that they position themselves as being like, we're looking for this type of solution, but we don't want to use this company regardless because of the price, because of the features, because of bad experience, whatever it may be. So then it's a really good way to appear. We don't just like bidding on things like Zoom because it's a really quick way to burn through your budget if you're just bidding on competitor terms. I did a video on that, which I'll link to down before, about how you can you go and qualify this out and what qualifiers to add. Skipping over here, most people focus on solution based, which is where the high CPCs are because they're problem aware and they're solution aware, and they know they just want to go out and find a provider because they haven't got a brand in mind. That would be like Google Ads optimization software, for example, and these companies bid here. These are typically really expensive and actually quite a low percentage of people are in market for a solution aware, but they don't have a brand in mind. So it's really good to bid here, but really make sure you use that CRM data to make sure you really find your sweet spot and position in the SERP, and even just the ones which is, back up your strongest use cases. So when someone does come through as a lead and you're sales led, the guys can pitch and have a really high win rate versus just bidding across the board. Sales guys coming in and every pitch they're competing on like price or features or credibility, and everyone's getting a bit confused on what the distinct, I guess, USP is they're selling that day or the differentiator. Where I quite like and what's getting quite good performance at the moment would be the likes of problem-focused Google Ads. So you'd have things like improved Google Ads performance. This person is problem-aware, but they're not solution-aware because they may not know if they want an agency, they may not know if they want a freelancer, they may not know if they want a software, they may not know if they are doing, I don't know, they may not know exactly what's out there, but at the moment, for example, Optio, they're bidding here because they're software, but they're also bidding on, a smarter way to do Google Ads. You've got SimilarWeb here, who does a very different thing to Optio. So this is kind of demand gen content in the direct response type approach, where how can you persuade someone when they're not quite sure what solution they need to be able to come in and use your product as the way to sort of plug that gap. And I did a video again, which I'll link below, on 4 really creative ways people have done that, from competitive banks to API software to loads of different ways you can go and implement this, because I think it's really important to have a problem-focused strategy from a keyword perspective, especially if the CPCs are really high and the search volume is really low, because it kind of blends creativity and sort of brings buyers further up the funnel to how you can then persuade them to buy. Now, from an ad perspective, I'd say this is pretty much a typical ad that we see in search now for software companies. We have, for example, if you're bidding on project management tool, then an ad would look like best project management tool, project management tool. It's not uncommon. People spend so much time doing keyword research, bidding optimization, implementing scripts, all that stuff, but then they forget the ad is the only bit that someone actually sees. And they write an ad like this and wonder why their click-through rate is under 1% and no one converts and all that sort of stuff. So what we kind of did as a breakdown, again, of a video which I'll link here. It's a theme here. We've done a lot of spin-off videos which you can go and find on the channel. And if you want to subscribe and get all these videos around B2B marketing and performance marketing in general, then definitely hit that subscribe button. But if we've got the way we broke it down would be the exact search term would be here. So like help desk software for manufacturing, for example, and then 8% of your focus should be on this headline here. This is going to be your differentiator. It's going to be your USP. It's going to be your value prop. It's going to be how you're positioned. It's going to be all these different things which you can test to see which one gets the best click through and sort of rotate them round. And then here can be a call to action or a sort of like another tested differentiator within here. Like David Ogilvy said, 80p of every pound is spent on the headline of articles. This was typically spoken about magazine articles. Google Ads is the same. The top line is going to be the main things people read. No one's going to really read these things down here unless they're highly engaged and they'll click on one of these extensions. But yeah, this is where you should spend most of your time when writing ads, and definitely stay away from things like this. Create a video about how to create perfect Google Ads. This way leverages AI and sentiment analysis, where you can go through and get all of your reviews, all of your competitor reviews, run them through like ChatGPT, and you see exactly what things people like about the products, what things people don't like about the products, and then you can craft those into themes, and then you can turn those themes into different types of ad copy. But yeah, definitely worth a watch going through down here. Now, finally, I just want to move on to variables, which we see people have issues with. When we go audit accounts, there's 4 typical things which we find that people are doing wrong, which they just shouldn't be doing across the board anyway. One of the big ones is going to be age. So we audited an account the other day that had 14,000 clicks from people that were 18 to 24 years old. This is enterprise software aimed at like CTOs. So again, people that are 18 to 24, they're probably doing dissertation research. They're probably just looking online for certain things to do with their coursework studies or just researching in that thing. So yes, you may get some success with sort of some influencers in a junior capacity researching this stuff, but a lot of the time we'd say this is going to be a lot of budget for something which doesn't actually come into fruition. Other ones is people go straight into the insights tab and don't create these audiences. So in this category here, you can see these observational audiences, which would be like either affinity in market, these are demographics like the size of employer, for example. What we see is people accidentally target these versus just create observational audiences. We recommend is creating loads of observational audiences which are relevant to what you are selling, and then you can kind of see the share of clicks and the index of how many times over the standard deviation that these guys are getting from the clicks, impressions, and then when conversions come, a conversion perspective as well. When you start then going from manual to automated bidding, they'll start using this data actually to work out who should get the clicks in the background. But it's always nice to make sure that you have this as observational, so you can do manual optimizations with bid adjustments, but don't target them, just make them observational. Don't have the search networks or display network turned on. This is another big one as well, because you don't want it to be appearing across random search networks, so you have no idea where they're appearing and the display network is full of fake clicks. And then headlines, make sure you pin the headlines where they should appear. So for example, don't just have get quote today without pinning this one here, because then it will just potentially put get quote today as your headline 1, which is going to be another big thing which we don't want people to do. And then finally with ads, just make sure they're rotated evenly versus letting Google optimize them straight away, because it doesn't actually do it fairly, which is what we found. The next thing is landing page. So with landing pages, it's going to be half the experience getting them to the account, half of them converting. I'm not going to go through landing pages in this video, but I have created a whole video with a free B2B SaaS unbounced landing template, which I will put a link to up here, because you can go through and you can do things like dynamic headers, automatic scrolls, the drop down FAQ section, and everything sort of built into this template. So if you want that template, go and watch this video how to use it. It's awesome. We've used it across the board for so many different sort of like clients and industries. We've used it across the board for so many different industries, and it's a really good layout of success. And I walk through it step by step in that video. I hope you found today useful, guys. Until next time, have a great week.